Hello and welcome back to Soul Search Sunday with Johnny Tiger on April 6, 2025. I had a bit of a disappointing experience with dinner today. After cleaning house all afternoon, I decided to reward myself by trying this new Shanghai style restaurant. Ordered it through Uber Eats, and yeah, what I thought I was getting, it wasn't what I thought it was. The supposedly chef's special shrimp and scallion noodle didn't have any scallion or shrimp in it. It was just noodle, like plain white noodle, flavored with a little bit of oil that maybe had some shrimp and scallion taste. It was just like no vegetable, no protein, just noodle. Crazy. I don't know what the world is coming to, man. I mean, Shanghai food back in my days, back in my childhood days, they were. Oh wait, that our topic of the day, isn't it? Is how or why people talk about the good old days. Uh, Psychology behind people reminiscing. I think in our lifetime we do a lot of reminiscing ourselves, and a lot of time we will come across people who do them, especially elders. And sometimes we get very impatient. Sometimes we feel like, well, it's not true. What do you mean the good old days? What do you mean that back in your days people didn't have to lock doors? That's not true. You're lying because those were back in your days. That's when Charles Manson happened, Jack the Ripper, Ted Bundy. That's when those people happened. So you can't say that back in your days there's no bad people. Well, what you're seeing, actually, what you're hearing is called selective memory. In psychology, selective memory is when people choose to only remember a certain part, and they take that good part, they take the good feeling, the nostalgic feeling, and magnify it to the point where it encompasses the reality they remember. They don't want to remember the bad stuff because the bad stuff honestly don't help them. They they remember the good stuff. They reminisce about the good stuff because that's what helps them. So rather than treating someone reminiscing as fact or someone telling a true story or someone giving you a historical account, treat it more like a therapy session and you will find it easier to stomach what they're talking about. So why do people reminisce? Well, most of the time you will find that most people who reminisce a lot are people who have gone through a lot of changes in their life. Because change is the most important component in reminiscing. If there's no change, if you live up in the mountains on your own and nothing changes around you, you're like a hermit and you live for 100 years. Every day of your life is the same. You get up in the morning, you do some tai chi, and then you go hunting and fishing, and then you come home, you cook whatever you caught, and then you go to bed. Then 100 years later, there's nothing for you to reminisce because your day today is still the same as your day 100 years ago. Yeah, okay, maybe you can reminisce about how 40 years ago you would have climbed that tree a lot faster, and you can reminisce how 50 years ago that tree was just a sapling, and you can reminisce how 80 years ago there were so many fish in the water you could walk across the river on the back of fish. Maybe you can reminisce about those things, but the fact is, if there's not a lot of change in your life, there's not a lot of things for you to reminisce about. The people who reminisce a lot are people who have experienced a lot of change. We see this when we look at the kind of movie that is popular in China and Korea versus the kind of movie that is popular here. If you look at the kind of movie that is popular in Korea and China today, a lot of them are very retro. A lot of them evokes the feeling of the 80s and the 90s. And even though some of them, the stories are crap, the plots crap, like there's nothing special about them. They're almost like, sorry for people who like Hallmark movie, but they're almost like Hallmark movie of Chinese Korean. Like you know what's going to happen. There's nothing complicated about it, but people love them. Why? Because they bring back the good old days. They bring back the 80s and 90s. As opposed to that, if you look at Western movies, Western media today, they are very futuristic. They are very Y2K. Like you have girls, boys walking around, teenage girls and boys with like wearing next to nothing, texting on the cell phone, and they talk to their parents like there's no respect or whatever. Like it there's very little nostalgic card being played in Western media. So why is it different? Well, because for Western people, for most Western countries, the real change, the time of change, happened in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s. The hippie era, the Second World War, the Great Depression, the Industrial Revolution, the building of factories and advancing of technology, Vietnam War, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, honestly, from the 80s onward, with the exception of the Gulf War or the World Trade Center, and then COVID, and then Ukraine, and then Middle East. With the exception to those, there's very little change from the 80s onward. Like, yeah, the computers gotten better, and porn's gotten more free, and stuff like that. But like there's very little drastic change. Uh, if you look at China, on the other hand, from the 80s onward, the change for Chinese people has been crazy fast. One-child policy came and went. Capitalism slowly get into their life. Now you're actually allowed to own your own cell phone. Now you're actually allowed to have your own assets. There's a lot of changes in politics and a lot of changes in technology and availability and all that stuff. So this result in a lot of people feel a little bit out of sort. They feel like they miss the simpler time. They miss the time in the 80s and 70s and early 90s where all you have to do is work on the farm all day long, and then at night you sit around the campfire, talk about who you want to marry, play music, talk about how you want to help run the country, and that's it. Like life back then was a lot simpler. So a lot of Chinese people and Korean people, after going through the last 30 years of drastic change, really miss the good old days, and that's why their media reflect that. Now, generally speaking, there's two groups of people, two types of reason for reminiscing and talking about the past. I call them the positive and the negative, just for simplicity's sake. Although I want to stress that negative doesn't mean that people who do that for the negative are bad people. It's just the negative people that are a little bit more sad, and it's not so bright and cheery. That's all. Okay, so let's talk about the positive first. The positive group are people who had a really bad in the past, and now their life is so much better. So this group of people like to look back in the past, not because they miss the past, but because remembering the past makes them appreciate their current reality a lot more. Okay. For example, me as a action figure collector, sometimes I like to talk about the past, but not because I think figures were good in the past. I talk about, oh man, can you remember back in the 90s, we thought it was amazing when action figure had 8 points of articulation, and now we have now we have action figures regularly having 30 points of articulation, and we still think that's not good enough. Like, can you imagine that? So when I talk about the good old days, or the bad old days in this case, I'm not doing it because I miss the action figure of yesteryear. I'm doing it to remind myself to appreciate the action figures of today. Recently, in the past few years, Jackie Chan released his bio, and a lot of people after reading the bio said, wow, why is he so negative? Why he talk about so many bad things? Well, his bad childhood, his bad teenage years, his bad first work experiences is like bad, bad, bad. Everything's negative. And then when he finally started making money, he talked about womanizing and gambling. What's wrong with him? Like, I don't want to read that about my idol. Well, he's doing that because he wants people to know and he wants himself to remember of the darkness he came out of by remembering the past and looking at how successful today he is today, donating to charities and making inspirational movies and funny movies. It makes him look good and makes him feel good to remember all the bad stuff he had to come through. It's like that feeling when you stand on top of a mountain looking at the sunset and you think about all the hardship you had to go through to get up that mountain. It's actually a really beautiful feeling. So now we look at the second group of people, the negative type. They reminisce because their life was once really, really good and now their life sucks. If you look at our first group, our positive group, if you draw a graph for their life, the line will start very low and then go up and down and up and down, a lot of up and down, and then, but it generally go up. Generally, there's an upward trend in their life. If you look at our second group, the negative type, and you draw a graph for their life, you'll see that their life start whether low or high. Okay, there's going to be a point in their life that is super super high, and then whoo, it dropped down to the bottom, and now they're stuck at the bottom. Prime example would be my own father. My dad is 82 years old. 40 years ago, he was very, very rich. Now, he was so rich that he could afford to throw away 700,000 US dollar in Las Vegas one night without blinking an eye. Now he's 82 years old. He struggles to pay his rent every month. So when he reminisced about the good old days, about the influence and wealth he had, he is using that as a coping mechanism. Because without that, without holding to that, clinging to that memory, he cannot survive every day. He cannot face his reality. The only way he can go on is by remembering the good old days where he was powerful and young and rich. So now that we know why people do it, why is reminiscing such an important thing for people to do, maybe next time when people reminisce, we wouldn't be so quick to cut them off and say, oh no, what you're saying is not true. Or we wouldn't be so quick in cutting them off and say, I heard that a million times already, why can't you talk about something new? Leave them alone, let them talk. They either talk about the good old days because they want to make themselves feel better today, appreciate their reality, or they talk about the good old days because that's the only way they can cope with their failing health, failing financial situation, and their current reality. So let's all be a bit kinder, a little bit more forgiving, and help everybody get along in the world. Thank you for checking out today's episode. I'll be back again tomorrow for more Johnny Tiger goodies. Have a good night.